The thunder of hooves echoed across the plains as Ryder Westbrook raced through the gathering storm, his weathered face set in grim determination. The year was 1873, and in the span of one brutal week, the 30-year-old cowboy had watched his entire life crumble like the dry Colorado soil beneath his horse's feet. Behind him lay the smoking remains of the modest ranch he'd built with his own two hands, the final insult in a series of tragedies that had stripped him of everything he held dear. The first blow came when his faithful border collie Scout disappeared during a spring roundup near the foothills. 3 days of desperate searching yielded nothing but exhaustion, and the haunting realization that the loyal companion who'd been at his side for 8 years was gone. Then, while Ryder was still reeling from the loss, his wife Martha, his partner through 7 years of hard living, succumbed to the fever that had been slowly claiming her for months. And now, returning from laying her to rest, he'd found his homestead ransacked and burned by rustlers who'd taken his meager herd. As lightning split the darkening sky, Ryder pushed his exhausted mount toward the distant lights of Animas Forks, a mining settlement nestled in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado Territory. The town had sprung up around silver strikes, drawing prospectors, merchants, and those seeking fortune or escape. For Ryder, it represented the only shelter within reach as the storm unleashed its fury. The main street was a river of mud by the time he dismounted outside the weathered clapboard structure that served as the town's only saloon. His boots made sucking sounds as he crossed to the hitching post, his fingers fumbling with the reins as the cold rain soaked through his duster. Inside, the Silverado saloon glowed with the warm light of oil lamps, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the scent of whiskey. Conversation hushed momentarily as Ryder pushed through the batwing doors, water streaming from his hat and coat. The piano player continued a melancholy tune in the corner as the patrons, seeing nothing particularly noteworthy about another rain-soaked cowboy, returned to their drinks and cards. Ryder made his way to the bar, shoulders hunched, his face a mask of quiet desperation beneath his dripping hat brim. He placed his last few coins on the scarred wooden surface. "Whiskey," he said, his voice rough from disuse, "and information about work if you have it." The bartender, a heavy-set man with graying mutton chops, nodded as he poured the amber liquid into a smudged glass. "Passing through or looking to stay? Got nowhere to pass through to," Ryder replied, lifting the glass and draining it in one swallow. The liquor burned a fiery trail down his throat, a welcome distraction from the deeper pain that had settled in his chest. "Trouble?" the bartender asked, already reaching for the bottle to pour another. "Life," Ryder answered simply, his eyes fixed on the scratched bar top. From the end of the bar, a woman's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Life has a way of taking everything, doesn't it?" Ryder turned to face the speaker and found himself looking into a pair of clear green eyes. They belonged to a woman in her late 20s, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical style, though a few strands had escaped to frame a face that bore the kind of beauty that came from character rather than delicate features. She wore a simple dress of faded blue, practical for the frontier, but somehow elegant on her slender frame. "Jessie Lawrence," she said, extending her hand in a forthright manner uncommon among the ladies of the frontier. "I own the boarding house at the end of the street." Ryder hesitated before accepting her hand, conscious of his own dirt-stained appearance. Ryder Westbrook, though at the moment that name doesn't amount to much. "Names rarely do out here," Jessie replied with a slight smile. "It's what a person does that matters," the bartender interrupted. Miss Jessie's being modest. "Her boarding house is the most respectable establishment in Animas Forks, She also runs the only proper restaurant for 20 miles. Ryder nodded politely, but his mind was elsewhere. The weight of the past week pressed down on him, making civil conversation seem an impossible task. He gestured for another whiskey. "Mr. Westbrook," Jessie said, her tone growing more serious. "Forgive my intrusion, but you look like a man who's seen more than his share of hardship recently. The storm won't let up tonight, and I have a vacant room. The rate's fair, and there's hot food included." "I appreciate the offer, but my funds are limited," Ryder replied, the admission costing him what little pride he had left. Jessie studied him for a moment, her eyes taking in the grief etched in the lines around his mouth, the hollow look of a man who'd lost everything. "I need help with repairs. The spring storms have done a number on my roof and porch. Work in exchange for room and board if you're interested." Ryder looked up sharply, searching her face for pity. Finding none, he gave a single curt nod. "I can handle repairs. I'm good with my hands." "I thought you might be," Jessie said, sliding off her stool. "Finish your drink. I'll wait by the door." As she walked away, the bartender leaned in. "You're fortunate. Miss Jessie doesn't extend such offers to just anyone. Lost her husband to mine collapse 3 years back. Runs that place on her own and better than most men could." Ryder watched her retreating form, a faint spark of something not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin flickering in the darkness that had enveloped him. He downed the second whiskey, left a small tip from his dwindling funds, and followed her to the door. Outside, the rain had settled into a steady downpour. Jessie led the way down the muddy street, holding a small lantern that cast a warm glow in the darkness. Ryder followed with his horse, neither of them speaking until they reached a 2-story clapboard structure set slightly apart from the other buildings. A hand-painted sign identifying it as Lawrence House swung in the wind. "Stables around back," Jessie said, pointing. "See to your horse, then come in through the kitchen door. I'll have something warm waiting." Ryder nodded and led his mount around the building to a small but well-maintained stable. Inside, he removed the saddle and rubbing down his exhausted horse before providing fresh water and hay. The simple routine of caring for the animal was comforting, a fragment of normalcy in a world that had lost all meaning. When he finally made his way to the kitchen door, the smell of coffee and something savory made his stomach clench with sudden hunger. He hadn't eaten properly in days, subsisting on jerky and whatever he could forage along the trail. Jessie looked up from the stove as he entered, gesturing to a small table in the corner. "Sit. You look about ready to fall over." Too tired to argue, Ryder removed his hat and coat, hanging them on a peg by the door, and sank into the offered chair. The kitchen was warm and clean, with bunches of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling and copper pots gleaming on the walls. It spoke of care and attention, of someone who took pride in their surroundings despite the harsh realities of frontier life. Jessie placed a bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread before him, followed by a cup of strong coffee. "Eat," she said simply, turning back to the stove. Ryder stared at the food for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple kindness after days of solitary grief. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't express. Jessie merely nodded, giving him the privacy to compose himself as she busied herself with kitchen tasks. He ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as his body remembered what it needed. The stew was rich with vegetables and chunks of beef, better fare than he'd had in months even before tragedy struck. "Where are you from, Mr. Westbrook?" Jessie asked after a while, sitting across from him with her own cup of coffee. Ryder looked up, considering how much to share. "Had a small place about 30 miles east. Not much, just enough land for a modest herd and some crops." "Had," she prompted gently. Ryder set down his spoon, the food suddenly tasteless despite his hunger. Lost it all. Dog disappeared during a roundup last week. Wife died 3 days ago. Fever took her after a long illness. While I was burying her, rustlers hit my place, took what stock I had left and burned the house. The stark recitation of facts did nothing to convey the devastation he felt, but it was all he could manage. Jessie's eyes softened with genuine sympathy, not pity. "I'm sorry, Mr. Westbrook. That's more than anyone should have to bear." Ryder nodded, unable to respond. After a moment, he pushed back from the table. "If you could show me where I'll be sleeping, I'd be grateful. It's been a long few days." Jessie rose and led him through the quiet house to a small but clean room on the second floor. A single bed with a patchwork quilt stood against one wall, a washstand with a pitcher and basin against another, and a simple chest of drawers completed the furnishings. "Bathrooms down the hall," she said. "There's hot water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. We can discuss the repairs in the morning." At the door, she paused and turned back to him. "Mr. Westbrook, whatever you've lost, you're still standing. Remember that." With those words, she left him alone with his thoughts and the first real comfort he'd known in days. Morning brought weak sunshine and the sounds of a town coming to life. Ryder woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling above him. For a fleeting instant, he reached across the bed, expecting to find Martha beside him. The empty space brought reality crashing back, along with the crushing weight of his losses. He rose mechanically, washed, and dressed in the same clothes he'd worn the day before, the only ones he now possessed. The mirror above the washstand reflected a face he barely recognized. Gaunt, with several days' growth of beard and eyes that held the hollow look of a man who'd seen too much. Downstairs, he found Jessie in the dining room, setting out plates for the half-dozen boarders who were already seated at the long table. Most were miners or shopkeepers, judging by their attire, and they regarded the newcomer with the curious but not unfriendly interest of men accustomed to the transient nature of frontier communities. Jessie introduced him simply as Mr. Westbrook, who will be helping with repairs, and the men nodded before returning to their breakfast. No questions were asked about his past or his business, another mercy of the West, where many came to escape or reinvent themselves. The breakfast was substantial: eggs, bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee served efficiently by Jessie with the occasional assistance of a young Mexican woman she called Rosa. When the boarders had departed for their various occupations, Jessie gestured for Ryder to remain seated. "I thought we might go over what needs doing," she said, pouring fresh coffee for them both. "The roof above the back bedroom leaks badly, and the front porch railing has rotted in several places. The storm cellar door needs replacing entirely, and the stable could use some work if you know anything about that sort of construction." Ryder nodded, mentally cataloging the tasks. "I can handle all of that. I'll need supplies, though." "I have an account at Thompson's Mercantile," Jessie replied. "He'll provide whatever you need. I'd appreciate if you'd start with the roof. We've got another storm coming in a few days according to old Tom at the livery, and I'd rather not have another flood in Mrs. Henderson's room." "I'll get to it right away," Ryder said, rising from the table. The prospect of physical labor was welcome, something to occupy his hands and, hopefully, quiet his mind. Jessie studied him for a moment. "If you don't mind me saying so, Mr. Westbrook, you might want to visit the barber first. Ezekiel runs a clean shop next to the assayer's office, and he could help with that beard. I can have Rosa wash your clothes while you work, too." Ryder ran a hand self-consciously over his stubbled jaw. "I don't have— Consider it part of our arrangement," Jessie interrupted firmly. "A man works better when he feels human. Something about her forthright manner broke through his haze of grief. "Thank you, Miss Lawrence. I've been a poor guest so far, bringing nothing but my troubles to your door." "We all have troubles, Mr. Westbrook," she replied with a slight smile. "And you haven't been a guest, yet you'll be earning your keep soon enough. Now go see Ezekiel while I make a list for Thompson's." The next few days established a routine that gave Ryder the structure he desperately needed. He rose early, took breakfast with the other boarders, and then threw himself into the repairs with single-minded focus. The physical exertion was therapeutic, allowing him to work through his grief in the rhythmic swing of a hammer or the careful measurement of lumber. Jessie proved to be a fair employer, providing clear instructions but giving him the freedom to approach the work in his own way. She brought him lunch each day, sandwiches or leftover stew, and engaged him in conversation that gradually drew him out of his shell. He learned that she had come to Colorado 5 years earlier with her husband Edward, a mining engineer who had believed in the potential of the San Juan Mountains. When Edward died in a shaft collapse, leaving her alone in the wilderness, Jessie had refused the offers to return east to her family in Boston. Instead, she'd used their savings to purchase the boarding house, creating both a livelihood and a home in the rugged community. "People thought I was mad to stay," she told Ryder as they sat on the newly repaired porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "My father wrote that no decent woman could survive alone in such a place." "But you proved them wrong," Ryder observed, noting the quiet pride with which she surveyed her establishment. Jessie smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. "I discovered something about myself out here, Mr. Westbrook. I'm stronger than anyone thought, including me." As the days passed, Ryder found himself watching Jessie with increasing admiration. She ran her business with efficiency and kindness, extending credit to miners down on their luck, providing meals for widows at reduced rates, and maintaining standards of cleanliness and comfort that were rare in frontier establishments. Yet there was nothing soft about her. She drove hard bargains with suppliers and stood her ground against drunken troublemakers, with a shotgun kept behind the counter. For her part, Jessie observed the gradual changes in the taciturn Cowboy. As he threw himself into the repairs, his movements became less mechanical, his eyes more focused. He began to interact with the other boarders, exchanging greetings and occasionally joining in conversations at dinner. Though he spoke little of his past, the raw grief that had marked his arrival began to subside into a quieter sorrow. A week after his arrival, Ryder completed the roof repairs, just as another storm rolled in from the mountains. Standing in the kitchen doorway, he watched with satisfaction as the rain pounded against the new shingles without a single drop penetrating the ceiling. "You do good work, Mr. Westbrook," Jessie said, appearing beside him with a cup of coffee. "Mrs. Henderson is delighted to have a dry room again." "Glad to hear it," Ryder replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. The day's labor had left him pleasantly tired, a welcome change from the bone-deep exhaustion of grief. "I'll start on the stable tomorrow if the rain lets up." Jessie nodded, then hesitated. "Actually, I was hoping you might accompany me to Thompson's in the morning. I need to place my monthly order and some of the items are heavy. Usually I hire one of the boys from the livery, but if you're willing." "Of course," Ryder said immediately. "Happy to help." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the storm, each lost in their own thoughts. Ryder found himself oddly content in that moment, despite everything he'd lost. The simple pleasure of a job well done, a dry roof, and the company of someone who expected nothing from him beyond his labor was unexpectedly healing. "Mr. Westbrook," Jessie said suddenly, her voice soft against the drumming of the rain. "May I ask you something personal?" Ryder tensed slightly but nodded. "Your wife, what was she like?" The question caught him off guard. In the days since his arrival, he'd managed to function by not thinking directly about Martha or Scout or the life he'd lost. Now, with Jessie's gentle inquiry, the memories flooded back, but strangely they brought a bittersweet ache rather than the searing pain he'd expected. "Martha was steady," he said finally, searching for the right words. "Not showy or dramatic. She knew what needed doing and did it without complaint. Came west with me from Missouri when we married, never looking back even when things got hard." He paused, remembering. "She loved wildflowers. Used to plant them around our cabin every spring. Said it reminded her that beauty can grow anywhere if you're stubborn enough." Jessie's eyes were soft with understanding. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Ryder agreed, surprised to find that speaking of Martha aloud was more comforting than painful. "The fever took her slowly. Gave me time to say goodbye at least. And your dog?" Jessie asked gently. At this, Ryder's expression darkened. "Scout, best cattle dog I ever saw. More than that, he was family. Just disappeared during a roundup near Blanca Peak. Searched for days, but there was no sign. No body, nothing. That was the start of it all going wrong." Jessie reached out impulsively, her hand briefly touching his arm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Westbrook, for all of it." Her touch, simple and human, broke something open inside him. "Call me Ryder," he said quietly. "Mr. Westbrook makes me feel like a stranger." She smiled, the warmth reaching her eyes. "Ryder, then, and I'm Jessie to my friends." The word hung between them, offering a tentative bridge across the chasm of loss that had defined his existence. Ryder found himself nodding, accepting both the name and what it represented, the possibility that life might hold something beyond grief. The next morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having washed the world clean. Ryder and Jessie walked side by side down the main street of Anima's Forks toward Thompson's Mercantile, exchanging greetings with townspeople along the way. Ryder was struck by how many people knew Jessie by name, and by the genuine respect in their manner toward her. Thompson's proved to be a well-stocked establishment, carrying everything from mining supplies to dress goods, foodstuffs to hardware. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted Jessie warmly. "Miss Lawrence, right on schedule as always. And who's this you've brought with you?" "Ryder Westbrook," Jessie replied. "He's helping with repairs at the boarding house." Thompson's sharp eyes assessed Ryder quickly. "Good to meet you, sir. Any friend of Miss Lawrence's is welcome here." As Jessie handed over her order list, Thompson continued, "You've come at an interesting time, Mr. Westbrook. Town's been buzzing with news from the Silver Nugget mine. They struck a rich vein last week, and there's talk of expanding operations. Means more jobs, more people coming in." "Good for business," Jessie observed, examining a bolt of cloth. "Indeed. Already had 3 inquiries about buildings for sale. The Prescott place down by the creek might finally sell, and old Jenkins is thinking of turning his barn into a dance hall." Thompson chuckled as he began assembling Jessie's order. "Anima's Forks might become a proper town yet, Miss Lawrence." Ryder listened to the exchange with interest. He'd been so consumed by his own troubles that he hadn't paid much attention to the town itself. Now, looking around the well-stocked store and recalling the busy saloon, he realized that Anima's Forks was more than just a temporary mining camp. It had the beginnings of permanent businesses established, services available, a community forming in the shadow of the mountains. As they left the store, arms laden with parcels, Jessie pointed out various landmarks: the small schoolhouse where classes were held 3 days a week, The doctor's office above the apothecary. The beginnings of a proper church being constructed at the edge of town. It's growing faster than anyone expected, she explained as they made their way back to the boarding house. When I first came with Edward, there were maybe 20 permanent structures. Now there's close to 50 and more going up all the time. You sound proud of it, Ryder observed, noting the animation in her voice. I suppose I am, Jessie admitted. I've watched it grow, been part of building something here. There's satisfaction in that. Her words stirred something in Ryder, a reminder of his own pride when he'd first built his cabin, fenced his land, branded his small herd. The sense of creating something from nothing, of carving a place in the wilderness through sheer determination. Back at the boarding house, as they unloaded the supplies in the kitchen, Ryder found himself studying Jessie with new eyes. She moved with efficiency, each item finding its proper place, her slender hands capable and sure. There was a quiet strength about her that reminded him of the mountains themselves, weathered by storms but ultimately enduring. I've been thinking, Jessie said suddenly, breaking into his thoughts. The stable needs more work than I initially realized. The foundation on the north side is deteriorating and the hayloft floor isn't safe. It's a bigger job than I can ask you to do for just room and board. Ryder shrugged. I don't mind, got nothing else pressing. That's generous but not fair, Jessie countered. I'd like to offer you a proper wage for the work, or... She hesitated, then continued with characteristic directness. Or a partnership of sorts. Partnership? Ryder echoed, confused. I've been considering adding livery services to the boarding house, Jessie explained. Many of my guests arrive with horses and currently have to pay separate fees at the town stable. If we expanded our facilities, we could offer complete accommodations, a room for the rider, a stall for the horse, all for one price. Ryder considered the idea, professional interest overriding his personal circumstances for the moment. It's sound thinking. You'd need more than just stalls, though. Feed, storage, tack room, possibly a smithy eventually. Exactly, Jessie nodded, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. I have the land behind the boarding house, but I lack the expertise. You clearly know horses and construction both. I'm proposing you oversee the building and then manage the operation. In return, you'd receive a percentage of the livery profits and continue to have room and board here. The offer was unexpected and generous, far more than the simple exchange of labor for shelter they'd initially agreed upon. Ryder felt a surge of conflicting emotions, gratitude for the opportunity, wariness at the prospect of new attachments, and beneath it all, a spark of interest in the project itself. Why would you trust me with this? He asked finally. You barely know me. Jessie's gaze was steady. I know enough. I've watched you work this past week, thorough, meticulous, honest. You care about doing things properly. That's rare out here, where most men are looking for quick profit and then moving on. She paused, then added more softly, and maybe we both need something to build, not just something to endure. Her perception cut close to the bone. Ryder turned away, ostensibly to examine a bag of flour but actually to collect himself. The idea of having a purpose again, of creating something useful, pulled at him with unexpected force. I need time to think about it, he said finally. Of course, Jessie replied, respecting his hesitation. The offer stands whenever you're ready. That night, Ryder lay awake long after the boarding house had fallen silent, turning Jessie's proposal over in his mind. It represented far more than a business opportunity. It was an invitation to put down roots again, to commit to something beyond mere survival. The thought was both terrifying and tempting. He'd come to Anima's Forks with nothing but grief and the clothes on his back, expecting nothing more than temporary shelter before moving on to Where? He had no destination, no plan beyond escaping the ruins of his former life. Jessie's offer provided not just employment but purpose, community, a chance to rebuild. As dawn lightened the eastern sky, Ryder made his decision. He would accept not with any grand declaration about starting over, but simply by beginning the work of designing the livery addition. Actions would speak clearer than words. Over breakfast, he outlined his initial thoughts to Jessie. A 6-stall stable with expansion potential, quality construction that would withstand the harsh mountain winters, efficient design to minimize labor. Her eyes brightened with each detail, and she contributed practical suggestions about location and access from the main road. "So you'll do it?" she asked when he'd finished. Ryder nodded, feeling the weight of commitment settle on his shoulders not oppressively, but like a well-fitted coat. "I'll do it right. Might take a while to complete, though." "We have time," Jessie replied simply, and something in her tone suggested she meant more than just the construction schedule. The project quickly became the focus of Ryder's days. He drew up plans, consulted with Thompson about materials, and began clearing the site behind the boarding house. The physical labor was satisfying, but even more rewarding was the mental engagement solving problems of drainage and access, calculating loads and stresses, planning for future expansion. Jessie proved to be an ideal partner, providing input without micromanaging, securing necessary permits from the town council, and handling the financial aspects with shrewd efficiency. Their working relationship evolved into an easy rhythm, each respecting the other's expertise and judgment. As May turned to June, the foundation was laid and the frame began to rise. Ryder hired 2 men from town to assist with the heavy work, but he supervised every aspect personally, often working from sunrise to sunset. The single-minded focus that had once characterized his grief now found healthier expression in creation. On a particularly hot afternoon, as Ryder was setting roof beams, Jessie appeared below with a bucket of cold water and clean cloths. "You'll bake up there," she called, shading her eyes against the sun. "Come down and cool off." Ryder reluctantly descended the ladder, wiping sweat from his brow. The mountain summer was intense, the high-altitude sun burning through the thin air with surprising ferocity. He accepted the dipper of water gratefully, drinking deeply before pouring some over his head and neck. "Progress looks good," Jessie observed, handing him a cloth. "Thompson says the lumber for the stall partitions will arrive next week." Ryder nodded, surveying the structure with critical eyes. "We're ahead of schedule. Should have the roof completed before the afternoon thunderstorms start up." "The boarders are placing bets on how quickly you'll finish," Jessie said with a smile. "Mr. Holloway has $5 on before the 4th of July celebration." "He might win that bet," Ryder replied, finding himself returning her smile. The ease of the gesture surprised him. Smiling had once seemed an impossibility in the depths of his grief. Yet here he was, standing in the sunshine with sweat cooling on his skin, feeling something close to contentment. Jessie studied him, her head tilted slightly. "You look different, Ryder." "Dirtier, I expect," he said wryly, glancing down at his dust-covered clothes. "No," she shook her head. "More present. When you first arrived, it was like you were half in this world and half somewhere else. Now you're here." The observation was so accurate it startled him. "I suppose I am," he acknowledged quietly. "This project, it helps." "I'm glad," Jessie said simply. Then, with her characteristic practicality, she added, "Dinner's at 6, Rosa made venison stew." As she turned to go, Ryder found himself calling after her. "Jessie," she paused, looking back questioningly. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate for what he meant but all he could manage. "For all of this." Her smile deepened, reaching her eyes. "You're welcome, Ryder. See you at dinner." That evening, sitting among the boarders at Jessie's long table, Ryder realized how much his life had changed in the few short weeks since his arrival. He knew these people now: Mr. Holloway the assayer, the Henderson sisters who ran the millinery shop, Dr. Fletcher who tended the town's ailments, and half a dozen others who made up the permanent residents of the boarding house. They'd accepted him into their community without question, including him in conversations and treating him as one of their own. And at the center of it all was Jessie, moving around the table refilling coffee cups, ensuring everyone had what they needed, her quiet efficiency making the boarding house feel like a home rather than just a business. Watching her interact with her guests, Ryder felt a warm current of admiration that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the woman herself. The realization brought with it a stab of guilt. It seemed a betrayal of Martha's memory to feel this stirring of interest in another woman so soon after her death. Yet even as the thought formed, Ryder knew that Martha herself would have urged him forward. "Life's for the living," she'd often said during her illness, extracting from him a promise not to waste his years in mourning once she was gone. After dinner, while the others retired to the parlor for cards or reading, Ryder slipped outside to the porch. The evening air carried the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains, cooler now as the sun set behind the western peaks. He sat on the newly repaired steps, trying to sort through his conflicted feelings. The creak of the door announced Jessie's arrival. Without speaking, she sat beside him, respecting his silence while offering company. Together they watched as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. "I used to do this with Edward," Jessie said after a while, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Sit out here and watch the stars come out." He knew all their names, could point out constellations I'd never heard of. Ryder glanced at her profile, limned in the fading light. "Do you still miss him?" "Yes," she answered honestly, "but differently now. The sharp pain has faded to a kind of wistful remembering. I'm grateful for the time we had rather than bitter about what was taken." Her words resonated with Ryder's own evolving grief. "That sounds like healing." "It is," Jessie agreed. "Though it takes longer than you expect and doesn't follow any predictable course." She turned to face him directly. "How are you healing, Ryder?" The directness of the question might have offended him once, but he'd come to appreciate Jessie's straightforward nature. "Better than I would have thought possible a month ago," he admitted. "The work helps, having purpose. And—" he hesitated, then finished honestly, "and having someone who understands." Their eyes held in the dim light, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Jessie's hand found his on the step between them, a light touch that carried no demand, only connection. "We're both familiar with loss," she said quietly. "Perhaps that's why we recognize in each other the struggle to move forward." Her insight struck Ryder forcefully. She was right, their shared experience of grief had created a foundation for understanding that went beyond ordinary acquaintance. In Jessie, he'd found someone who didn't flinch from sorrow but knew how to continue living despite it. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then the boarding house door opened, spilling light onto the porch as Mr. Holloway stepped out with his pipe. "Fine evening," the older man commented, seemingly oblivious to the moment he'd interrupted. "Stars are particularly bright tonight." Jessie withdrew her hand casually and rose to her feet. "Indeed they are. I should check on Rosa, she was finishing the dishes." With a smile that held a hint of something unresolved, she disappeared inside, leaving Ryder to ponder the complex emotions stirring within him. July arrived with blazing heat and the promised completion of the livery addition. The structure stood solid and well crafted behind the boarding house, exactly as Ryder had envisioned it. 6 spacious stalls with room for expansion, a tack room, feed storage, and a small office. The weathered wood of the siding had been painted to match the boarding house, making it appear as though the buildings had always belonged together. On the day before the official opening, Ryder stood in the doorway, surveying his work with quiet satisfaction. Every beam, every nail, every carefully fitted board represented his commitment to quality and permanence. It was a structure built to last, to withstand the harsh mountain winters and serve the community for years to come. "It's magnificent," Jessie said, coming to stand beside him. "Even better than I imagined." Ryder accepted the compliment with a nod. "Should serve the purpose well. Thompson's sending over the signboard this afternoon, Lawrence House and livery painted in proper lettering." "Actually," Jessie said, a note of hesitation in her voice, "I was thinking we might call it Lawrence and Westbrook Boarding and Livery since it's a partnership." Ryder turned to her in surprise. "You'd put my name on your business, our business," Jessie corrected gently. "If you're staying." The question hung between them, more significant than a mere business inquiry. Ryder had never explicitly stated his intention to remain in Anima's Forks permanently, though his meticulous work on the livery suggested a commitment beyond temporary employment. "I'm staying," he said finally, the decision feeling right as he spoke it aloud, "at least for the foreseeable future." Jessie's smile was warm with relief. "I'm glad. The town's planning a proper Independence Day celebration tomorrow, parade down Main Street, picnic by the creek, fireworks at dark. It would be fitting to open the livery then, make it part of the festivities." "Sounds appropriate," Ryder agreed, his mind already turning to the practical details of the opening. The 4th of July dawned clear and promising, with flags and bunting decorating the buildings along Main Street. Anima's Forks had transformed for the occasion, the usual dust and practicality of a mining town giving way to a spirit of celebration. Even the miners had the day off, emerging from their claims and bunkhouses, scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday best. The parade began at 10 o'clock, led by the town's small brass band, followed by wagons decorated with patriotic themes, riders on horseback, and children waving flags. Ryder stood with Jessie in front of the boarding house, watching the procession with a sense of belonging that had been absent from his life for too long. "The town council wants me to say a few words at the picnic," Jessie confided as they prepared to join the crowd moving toward the creek after the parade. "About the new livery and what it means for Anima's Forks." "You'll do fine," Ryder assured her, noting the slight nervousness in her manner. "You know these people and they respect you." Jessie smoothed her dress, a new one of blue calico with white trim, purchased specially for the occasion. "Will you stand with me? As my partner, I mean." The request was practical, but Ryder detected something more in her eyes, a desire for his support that went beyond business considerations. "Of course," he replied, offering his arm with formal courtesy. The creek bank had been transformed into a festive gathering place, with tables set up under the cottonwoods and quilts spread on the grass. The women of the town had outdone themselves, producing an array of dishes that showcased their culinary skills despite frontier limitations. Fried chicken, ham, cornbread, potato salad, pies of every description, and lemonade in huge stone crocks. After the blessing was said and plates were filled, the mayor, a portly former prospector named Wilson, called for attention. He made a short speech about the growth of Anima's Forks and its promising future, then introduced Jessie as one of our most respected business owners with an announcement of interest to all. Ryder felt a surge of pride as Jessie stepped forward, her composure perfect as she addressed the gathered townspeople. She spoke clearly about the new livery, explaining the services it would offer and how it would benefit travelers to Anima's Forks. Then, with a gesture that brought Ryder to her side, she introduced him as her partner in the venture. Mr. Westbrook brings expertise in horses and construction that complements my experience in hospitality, she explained. Together, we hope to provide a complete service that will encourage visitors to stay longer in our growing community. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, particularly from the merchants who understood the economic advantage of keeping travelers in town. After the speeches, many people approached to congratulate them and express interest in touring the new facility. As the afternoon progressed, Ryder found himself drawn into the community in ways he hadn't anticipated. Men sought his opinion on horse-related matters, women thanked him for the improvements to Miss Jessie's place, and even the children included him in their games. It was, he realized with some surprise, the feeling of having a place, of belonging. As sunset approached, the celebration moved back to Main Street for the promised fireworks. Ryder and Jessie walked together, comfortable in a silence born of shared accomplishment. "It's been a good day," Jessie observed as they found a spot from which to view the display. "It has," Ryder agreed, watching as the first rockets soared into the darkening sky, exploding in bursts of red and blue. The crowd gasped and applauded, faces upturned in wonder at the spectacle. In the flashing light of the fireworks, Ryder studied Jessie's profile, the elegant line of her neck, the curve of her cheek, the way her eyes reflected the brilliant colors above. Something shifted inside him, a recognition that his feelings for her had grown beyond admiration or gratitude into something deeper and more complex. As if sensing his gaze, Jessie turned to him, her expression open and unguarded in the intermittent light. "What are you thinking, Ryder?" "That I'm fortunate," he answered honestly. "A few months ago I thought my life was over. Now I find myself with a new purpose, a new community." He paused, then added softly, "And a partner I've come to value more than I can express." Jessie's eyes widened slightly at his words, understanding their implication. For a moment, they stood suspended in possibility, the world around them fading as they regarded each other with new awareness. Then a particularly loud burst of fireworks broke the spell, and Jessie looked away, a flush visible on her cheeks even in the uneven light. "I feel the same," she said, her voice barely audible above the crowd's exclamations. "About the partnership, I mean." The slight qualification told Ryder she wasn't ready to acknowledge the growing personal connection between them, or perhaps felt it would be disrespectful to their respective losses. He respected her reticence, content for now with the knowledge that something significant had shifted between them. As summer progressed into fall, the Lawrence and Westbrook boarding and livery established itself as a cornerstone of Anima's Forks. The expanded silver operations brought increased traffic to the town, and many travelers chose their establishment for its combination of comfortable rooms and quality horse care. Ryder found himself fully occupied managing the livery, hiring a young man named Tom as an assistant, and occasionally helping with maintenance around the boarding house. His relationship with Jessie evolved into a comfortable partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. They consulted each other on business decisions, ate meals together, and often spent evenings on the porch discussing the day's events. To the townspeople, they presented a united front, the capable widow and the skilled horseman, whose combined talents enhanced the community. What remained unspoken was the deepening personal connection between them. Ryder found himself noticing small details about Jessie, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, her habit of humming softly while working, the particular smile she seemed to reserve for him alone. For her part, Jessie sought his company with increasing frequency, finding reasons to visit the livery during the day and lingering in conversation after the boarders had retired at night. Neither mentioned the growing attraction. As if by tacit agreement, they were allowing it to develop naturally, without the pressure of declaration or definition. There was a sweetness to this gradual unfolding, a healing in the slow recognition that life could offer new beginnings even after devastating loss. The first snow fell in early October, dusting the mountains with white and reminding everyone that winter would soon envelop the high country. The town prepared for the harsh season ahead, storing supplies and completing necessary repairs while the weather permitted. At the boarding house, Ryder installed extra insulation, checked the stoves and chimneys, and ensured the livery was prepared for winter operation. One crisp morning, as he was chopping firewood behind the kitchen, Ryder was startled by the sound of excited barking coming from the direction of Main Street. He paused, axe in hand, a painful memory surfacing at the familiar sound. It couldn't be, and yet the distinctive pattern of barks tugged at something deep inside him. Setting down the axe, he made his way toward the commotion. A small crowd had gathered around a wagon that had just arrived, but Ryder's attention was fixed on the black and white border collie dancing around the vehicle's wheels, barking joyously as if announcing its presence to the world. "Scout," Ryder called, his voice cracking with disbelief. The dog froze at the sound, ears perked forward. Then, with a high-pitched whine that tore at Ryder's heart, Scout launched himself through the crowd, a blur of black and white fur heading straight for his master. Ryder dropped to his knees as Scout reached him, the dog's entire body wriggling with ecstasy as he licked Ryder's face and hands, whining and barking in an overflow of canine emotion. Tears blurred Ryder's vision as he buried his face in the familiar fur, breathing in the scent of his lost companion. "How?" he began, unable to form a coherent question as he ran his hands over Scout, checking for injuries but finding the dog whole and apparently healthy, if somewhat thinner than before. The wagon's driver, a bearded man in a heavy coat, approached with a grin. "That your dog, mister?" "Found him about 70 miles east of here, half-starved and with a badly cut paw. Nursed him back to health, but he never settled, always trying to head west. Figured he was looking for his owner, so I decided to bring him along on my supply run." "Never seen a smarter animal, knew exactly where he was going once we hit town." Ryder stood, Scout pressed against his leg as if afraid to lose contact. "I can't thank you enough. He disappeared months ago. I thought he was gone for good." "Border collies are loyal to a fault," the man said, clearly pleased by the reunion. "Once they decide you're their person, nothing short of death will change their mind." He waved away Ryder's offer of payment. Seeing him find his home is reward enough. Besides, he earned his keep hunting rabbits along the way. Word of Scout's miraculous return spread quickly through Anima's Forks. By noon, half the town had stopped by the livery to witness the reunion and hear the story. Scout accepted the attention regally, but never strayed more than a few feet from Ryder, as if determined never to be separated again. Jessie arrived with a beef bone from the kitchen and tears in her eyes. "It's a miracle," she said, watching as Scout accepted the offering with dignity before settling at Ryder's feet to enjoy it. "After all this time." "I can hardly believe it myself," Ryder admitted, his hand resting on Scout's head. The dog's return had awakened complex emotions, joy at the reunion, but also painful memories of the life that had included both Scout and Martha. "He's the last link to, before," understanding softened Jessie's expression. A piece of your past returned to you. That's a rare gift, Ryder. As evening approached, Ryder closed up the livery and made his way to the boarding house, Scout trotting faithfully at his heels. The dog adapted to the new surroundings with typical border collie intelligence, quickly identifying Ryder's room and settling on the rug beside the bed, as if he'd always belonged there. That night, with Scout's comforting presence nearby, Ryder lay awake contemplating the strange turns his life had taken. 6 months earlier, he had lost everything that mattered: his dog, his wife, his home. Now, against all odds, Scout had returned. He had a new home and purpose in Anima's Forks, and he had Jessie. The thought pulled him up short. What exactly did he have with Jessie? A business partnership, certainly. A friendship, without question. But the feelings that stirred whenever she was near went far beyond these practical connections. There was an attraction he could no longer deny, a deep appreciation for her strength and character, and increasingly, a desire for something more permanent than their current arrangement. Martha's memory no longer felt like a barrier. Instead, Ryder sensed that she would have approved of Jessie, of her practicality and resilience, her kindness and determination. Two women more different in background could hardly be imagined, yet they shared a fundamental quality of meeting life's challenges without surrender. As for Jessie's feelings, Ryder could only interpret the signs. Her seeking his company, the warmth in her eyes when they spoke, the way she included him in her plans for the future of the business. She had never spoken directly of romance or marriage, but there were moments: a lingering touch, a glance held too long that suggested her interest might match his own. The following evening, after the boarders had retired and the house was quiet, Ryder and Jessie sat in the kitchen sharing a pot of coffee. Scout lay curled by the stove, occasionally opening one eye to check that his master was still present before returning to his doze. "He's settled in as if he's always been here," Jessie observed, watching the dog with a smile. "Border collies adapt," Ryder replied, reaching down to stroke Scout's ear. "And he seems to have decided this is home now." "Is it?" Jessie asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Home, I mean. For you as well as Scout." The question hung in the warm kitchen air, laden with implications beyond its simple phrasing. Ryder met her gaze directly, knowing that his answer mattered more than ordinary conversation. "It is," he said firmly. "More than I expected or hoped for when I arrived." Jessie's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "I'm glad. The business is thriving and the boarders appreciate having a man around for the heavier work. It's a good arrangement for everyone." "Is that all it is, Jessie?" Ryder asked quietly. "A business arrangement?" Color rose in her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "You know, it's more than that. At least for me it is." "For me as well," Ryder acknowledged, relief and anticipation mingling at her admission. "I've come to care for you, Jessie, more than I thought possible after Martha." Jessie reached across the table to take his hand, her fingers warm and slightly calloused from her work. "I understand. After Edward, I never expected to feel this way again either. It's different, not replacing what was lost, but creating something new." "Exactly," Ryder agreed, grateful for her perception. "I don't want to rush you or dishonor either of our pasts, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond partnership or friendship." "As have mine for you," Jessie replied softly, "but I've been hesitant to speak of it. When you arrived, you were so broken by grief. I feared any expression of feeling might seem like taking advantage of your vulnerability." Ryder squeezed her hand gently. "You've never taken advantage, Jessie. You offered help when I needed it most, with no conditions attached. What's grown between us since then has been natural and honest." For a long moment they sat in silence, hands joined across the table, each absorbing the significance of the conversation. Then Jessie spoke again, her practical nature reasserting itself. "What happens now? Do we court formally? Announce our intentions to the town?" Ryder couldn't help smiling at her directness. "Would you like that? Formal courtship, I mean." "I think I'm a bit old for ribbon buying and parlor visits," Jessie replied with a touch of humor. "But I wouldn't object to spending more time together beyond business matters. Perhaps Sunday drives or attending church together openly as a couple." "I'd like that," Ryder said, realizing how much he wanted the simple pleasure of walking beside her in public, acknowledged as her chosen companion rather than merely her business partner. From his place by the stove, Scout sighed contentedly, as if approving the development. Jessie laughed softly at the sound. "Even Scout agrees. It seems we're decided then." "We are," Ryder confirmed, feeling a sense of rightness settle over him. This wasn't the life he had planned or expected, but it was good a second chance he hadn't dared to hope for when he rode into Anima's Forks on that rainy night months ago. Winter descended on Anima's Forks with its usual severity, transforming the mountain town into a landscape of white and gray. Heavy snows isolated the community for days at a time, though the stagecoach still made its weekly run when conditions permitted, and hardy travelers occasionally appeared seeking shelter from the elements. The Lawrence and Westbrook boarding and livery remained busy despite the weather. Miners from outlying claims came to town for supplies, and stayed rather than risk the journey back in snowstorms. The boarding house became a social center during the long winter evenings, with Jessie organizing card games, musical evenings, and holiday celebrations that brought the community together. Ryder and Jessie's courtship progressed naturally within this setting. They attended Sunday services together, shared meals apart from the boarders when possible, and occasionally drove out in the sleigh Ryder had purchased specifically for their outings. The townspeople accepted the development with approving nods and knowing smiles. Most had suspected the partners' feelings long before they acknowledged them openly. Scout thrived in his new environment, appointing himself guardian of both the boarding house and the livery. He learned to distinguish between welcome guests and potential troublemakers, herded stray children back to their parents during snowstorms, and even assisted in the kitchen by carrying messages between Jessie and Rosa when needed. As Christmas approached, Ryder found himself contemplating a more permanent commitment. He and Jessie had built a solid foundation: mutual respect, shared goals, and deepening affection. Their business thrived, and their personal connection grew stronger with each passing day. The logical next step was marriage, but Ryder hesitated, unsure if Jessie was ready for such a commitment, or if proposing so soon after beginning their courtship might seem hasty. The opportunity to gauge her feelings came unexpectedly during preparations for the boarding house Christmas celebration. Jessie had invited all the residents, along with several townspeople who would otherwise be alone for the holiday, to a special dinner on Christmas Eve. The house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. The dining table extended to its full length, and Rosa was preparing a feast that would showcase the best the frontier community could offer. On the afternoon before the celebration, Ryder was helping Jessie decorate the parlor when she paused, a sprig of mistletoe in her hand. "Edward and I always hung this over the door," she said thoughtfully. "It's a silly tradition, but it brought laughter to the house." "Not silly at all," Ryder replied, taking the greenery from her and moving to hang it from the designated spot. "Traditions are important, especially during the holidays." Jessie watched him, her expression thoughtful. "I wondered if it might make you uncomfortable, if it might seem disrespectful to Martha's memory." Ryder secured the mistletoe before turning to face her. "Martha would have been the first to grab me for a kiss beneath it," he said, the memory bringing a smile rather than pain. She loved Christmas traditions, decorating, baking, singing carols. The last Christmas before she fell ill, she insisted on having a proper tree even though we were miles from anywhere. Made me cut one from our property and drag it inside, then decorated it with things she'd been saving all year. She sounds wonderful, Jessie said softly. She was, Ryder agreed. And she would have liked you, Jessie. Your strength, your practicality, your kindness. She wouldn't have wanted me to grieve forever. Jessie stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. Edward would have felt the same way. He always said life was for living, not for dwelling on what couldn't be changed. Wise man, Ryder observed, covering her hand with his own. Jessie, I've been thinking. Before he could continue, the front door burst open, bringing with it a swirl of snow and several excited boarders returning from town with last-minute purchases. The moment for private conversation was lost in the flurry of activity that followed, as packages were unwrapped, decorations completed, and final preparations made for the evening's celebration. The Christmas Eve dinner exceeded everyone's expectations. The long table gleamed with Jessie's best china and silver, borrowed from various boarders to complete settings for 20 guests. Candles provided warm light, and the food roast beef, mashed potatoes, fresh baked bread, and 3 types of pie drew appreciative exclamations from even the most seasoned miners accustomed to camp cooking. After dinner, the gathering moved to the parlor for carols around the piano with Dr. Fletcher providing accompaniment and Mr. Holloway surprising everyone with a fine tenor voice. Scouts circulated among the guests, accepting treats and affection with dignified tolerance, while Ryder and Jessie moved about ensuring everyone's comfort. As midnight approached and the celebration began to wind down, Ryder found himself standing beside Jessie near the doorway, watching as their guests prepared to depart into the snowy night. Mr. Holloway was the first to notice their position. "Well, well," the older man said with a mischievous grin, pointing upward. "Look who's standing under the mistletoe." All eyes turned to them, standing beneath the sprig of greenery Ryder had hung earlier. Jessie blushed but didn't move away, her eyes meeting Ryder's with a mixture of embarrassment and anticipation. "Tradition's tradition," Dr. Fletcher called encouragingly, the sentiment echoed by several others. For a moment, Ryder hesitated, conscious of the public setting and Jessie's natural reserve. Then, with a smile that was for her alone, he took her hand and bent to place a gentle kiss on her lips, brief, but unmistakably affectionate. The assembled guests applauded and cheered, their reaction warming the room more effectively than the blazing fireplace. As they began donning coats and exchanging final holiday wishes, Ryder kept Jessie's hand in his, a silent acknowledgement of the step they'd taken. When the last guest had departed and only the boarders remained, chatting quietly or heading upstairs to their rooms, Jessie and Ryder found themselves alone in the kitchen. Scout lay dozing under the table, replete with scraps from the feast and content in the peaceful atmosphere. "That was quite an evening," Jessie said, removing the last dishes from the drying rack. "It was," Ryder agreed, leaning against the counter beside her. "Your best celebration yet, I'd say." "Our celebration," she corrected gently. "I couldn't have done it without your help." The phrase struck Ryder as significant beyond the context of the holiday dinner. "We make a good team, Jessie, in business and beyond." "We do," she agreed, setting down the towel she'd been holding and turning to face him fully. "What were you going to say earlier, Ryder?" Before we were interrupted, he took a deep breath, recognizing the moment for what it was, a chance to speak the thoughts that had been forming in his mind for weeks. "I was going to say that I've been thinking about the future, our future." Jessie's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue. When I came to Anima's Forks, I'd lost everything I valued: my dog, my wife, my home. I didn't expect to find any of those things again, let alone all three. He took her hands in his. But Scout returned against all odds. And you, Jessie, you've become more important to me than I can express. The boarding house feels like home now, but the truth is, home is wherever you are. Tears glistened in Jessie's eyes, but she smiled through them. I remember what I said to you that first night when you told me what you'd lost. I said I could be all three for you: your dog, your wife, your home. I meant it as comfort then, but now it means something more, Ryder finished for her. Jessie Lawrence, I love you. Would you consider becoming my wife? Not to replace what either of us lost, but to build something new together. For answer, Jessie stepped into his arms, her face upturned to his. Yes, Ryder, I would be honored to be your wife. Their kiss was deeper than the one shared under the mistletoe, a private affirmation of the commitment they'd just made. Scout, roused by the change in atmosphere, padded over to press against their legs, his tail wagging in apparent approval of the development. Laughing softly, Jessie bent to scratch the dog's ears. Even Scout agrees it's the right decision. He's always been a good judge of character, Ryder replied, his arm still around Jessie's waist. Though I think he fell for you before I admitted my own feelings. Smart dog, Jessie murmured, leaning her head against Ryder's shoulder. They were married on New Year's Day, 1874, in a simple ceremony at the newly completed church. Despite the winter weather, nearly the entire town turned out to witness the union of two of their most respected citizens. Scout served as ring bearer, carrying the simple gold bands in a small pouch attached to his collar, and delivering them with solemn dignity when called upon. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the boarding house, where tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes brought by well-wishers. Music, dancing, and congratulations filled the evening, with even the most taciturn miners offering heartfelt good wishes to the couple. As the party continued around them, Ryder and Jessie slipped away to the porch for a moment of quiet. The winter night was clear, stars brilliant in the black sky above the snow-covered mountains. Ryder wrapped a blanket around them both as they stood gazing out at the peaceful scene. "Happy, Mrs. Westbrook?" he asked, his arm secure around her waist. "Very," Jessie replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I think the sign will have to remain Lawrence and Westbrook for business purposes. Clearer that way." Ryder chuckled at her practicality, one of the many qualities he'd come to love about her. Always thinking of the business. "Not always," she countered, turning in his arms to face him. "Right now I'm thinking only of my husband and our future together. And what do you see in that future?" Ryder asked, genuinely curious about her vision for their shared life. Jessie's expression grew thoughtful. "I see the business growing as Anima's Forks develops, perhaps adding rooms to the boarding house, expanding the livery as needed. I see us continuing to build something meaningful together." She paused, then added more softly, "And perhaps, in time, a family of our own." The idea of children, something Ryder had given up hope for after Martha's illness prevented pregnancy, filled him with unexpected warmth. "I'd like that," he said honestly. "Very much." "So would I," Jessie replied, her smile reflecting the joy he felt. "But for now, I'm content with you and Scout and the life we're creating here." From inside came the sound of laughter and music, a reminder of the community that had embraced them both. Scout appeared at the door, looking questioningly at his humans as if checking that all was well. "We're coming, boy," Ryder assured him, giving Jessie a gentle squeeze before releasing her. "Our guests are waiting." As they returned to the celebration, Ryder reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this moment. From the depths of despair to the heights of happiness, from loss to renewal, his life had transformed in ways he could never have imagined when he first rode into Anima's Forks. The words Jessie had spoken that first night echoed in his mind. "Then let me be all three for you." What had begun as comfort offered to a stranger had become a promise fulfilled beyond all expectation. In Jessie, he had found not just shelter but home, not merely companionship but love, not simply purpose but a future bright with possibility. And as they rejoined their friends and neighbors, Scout trotting faithfully at their heels, Ryder knew with absolute certainty that the journey ahead, whatever challenges it might hold, would be one they would travel together. Spring arrived in Anima's Forks with the usual drama of the mountain's sudden thaws, rushing creeks, and wildflowers erupting from seemingly barren ground. As the snow receded, the town emerged from its winter isolation with renewed energy. Miners returned to outlying claims, supply wagons resumed regular schedules, and construction began on several new buildings along Main Street. For Ryder and Jessie, the changing season brought both professional opportunities and personal adjustments. Their business thrived as increased traffic brought new guests to the boarding house and horses to the livery. The transition from business partners to married couple had been surprisingly smooth, their working relationship enhanced rather than complicated by their deeper connection. They'd established comfortable routines, rising early to prepare for the day, Jessie overseeing the boarding house operations while Ryder managed the livery, coming together for meals and sharing the evening tasks before retiring to the private apartment they'd created by combining 2 rooms at the back of the house. Scout divided his time between them, helping Ryder with the horses during the day and settling at Jessie's feet in the evenings as she handled the accounts. One afternoon in late April, as Ryder was shoeing a particularly difficult horse, he looked up to see Jessie approaching the livery, her expression thoughtful. She waited until he had finished the task and released the animal to its stall before speaking. "I've had an interesting visitor today," she said, handing him a cloth to wipe his hands. "Thomas Jenkins from the bank." Ryder raised an eyebrow. Their dealings with the town's small bank had been limited to deposits from the business income. "Problems with our account?" "Quite the opposite," Jessie replied. "He came with a proposition. The Prescott property, the abandoned ranch about 5 miles west of town, has finally reverted to the bank after sitting empty for 2 years. Jenkins is authorized to offer it to us at a very reasonable price." Ryder's interest was immediately piqued. The Prescott place had been a substantial operation before its owner died without heirs, leaving the property in legal limbo. Located in a protected valley with good water access, it included a sturdy house, barn, corrals, and approximately 80 acres of grazing land. "What's their motivation?" he asked, naturally cautious after his experiences with property disputes in the past. "The bank wants the property producing again, generating taxes and economic activity," Jessie explained. "They've had no serious offers because most newcomers want to be closer to the mines. But for someone already established in the area, with knowledge of livestock and business connections." "Like us," Ryder finished for her. "What are you thinking, Jessie? It would be a significant expansion from our current operation." She leaned against the stall door, her practical mind clearly already working through the possibilities. "I'm thinking it could be an opportunity to grow in a direction that leverages your experience. We could maintain the boarding house and livery in town while developing the ranch property for breeding and training horses. There's always demand for good stock in the mining districts." The idea held immediate appeal for Ryder. While he enjoyed managing the livery, His true expertise lay in breeding and training horses, skills he'd developed on his previous ranch, but had limited opportunity to exercise in the confines of the town operation. It would mean dividing our attention, he noted, thinking aloud rather than objecting. We'd need reliable help here if we were spending time at the ranch. Tom has proven himself capable with the livery, Jessie countered. And Rosa could take more responsibility for the boarding house daily operations. We wouldn't be abandoning what we've built, just expanding it. Ryder studied his wife's face, reading the enthusiasm behind her practical assessment. You really want this, don't you? A smile broke across Jessie's features. I do. The boarding house has been my anchor after losing Edward, and I don't regret a moment of building it into what it is today. But the ranch, it would be something we create together from the beginning. Something that combines both our skills and dreams. Her words resonated deeply with Ryder. The livery had given him purpose when he needed it most, but it had been primarily Jessie's vision that he'd helped execute. The prospect of building something that drew equally on both their strengths, her business acumen and his horsemanship, was undeniably attractive. When does Jenkins need an answer? He asked, already mentally calculating costs and logistics. He's given us a week to consider, Jessie replied. And he's invited us to ride out and inspect the property tomorrow if we're interested. Ryder nodded, decision already forming. Then we'll go tomorrow, see what we're dealing with before making any commitments. The following day dawned clear and mild, perfect for the ride to the Prescott property. Ryder saddled their horses while Jessie packed a lunch, and by mid-morning they were following the well-traveled road west out of Anima's Forks. Scout raced ahead, delighted by the expedition and the freedom to explore the spring landscape. As they crested a rise about 5 miles from town, the Prescott Ranch came into view below them, a cluster of weathered buildings nestled in a natural bowl of land, with a creek winding through it and stands of aspen and pine providing windbreaks. Though clearly neglected for the past 2 years, the basic infrastructure remained sound. A substantial 2-story house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and fenced corrals and pastures. It's bigger than I remembered, Jessie commented as they rode down toward the property. Edward and I came to dinner here once, when old Mr. Prescott was still alive. He was quite proud of what he'd built. Ryder surveyed the layout with a professional eye, noting the intelligent design that maximized natural resources while providing protection from the elements. He knew what he was doing. Good water source, natural shelter, defensible position, must have been one of the first to settle in this valley. They spent several hours exploring the property, examining the structures for damage, assessing the condition of the fences and water systems, and evaluating the quality of the grazing land. Despite the period of abandonment, the ranch had weathered relatively well. The house would need significant cleaning and some repairs, but its stone foundation and sturdy construction had prevented major deterioration. The barn and corrals needed more extensive work, with several sections of fencing down and a portion of the barn roof requiring replacement. It's a lot of work, Ryder observed as they sat on the porch steps eating their lunch, Scout stretched out beside them in a patch of sunshine. But nothing that can't be fixed with time and effort. Jessie nodded, her gaze sweeping across the property with that same thoughtful expression she'd worn when proposing the livery expansion. The potential is obvious. Good grazing, enough land for hay production, proximity to town for easy access to supplies and markets. She turned to him, her practical nature asserting itself. But the question is, do we want to take this on? We've just gotten the boarding house and livery running smoothly. Ryder considered the question seriously. The ranch represented not just a business opportunity, but a lifestyle change, a return in many ways to the life he'd led before losing everything. Yet this time he wouldn't be building alone. He'd have Jessie as a partner, combining her business sense with his practical knowledge. "I think we do," he said finally. "It's a chance to grow beyond what we have now, to create something that could eventually be passed on." He didn't explicitly mention children, but the implication was clear: the ranch could become a legacy for the family they hoped to establish. Jessie's smile told him she'd understood his unspoken thought. "I agree. And the timing seems right. We're established enough in town to manage both operations initially, and the price Jenkins is offering makes it a sound investment even if we develop it slowly." Decision made, they continued their exploration with renewed purpose, Ryder measuring spaces and calculating lumber needs while Jessie made notes about household requirements and potential improvements. By the time they mounted up for the return journey to town, both were committed to the purchase. The news of their expansion plans spread quickly through Anima's Forks, met with a mixture of congratulations and practical offers of assistance. Several of the miners volunteered to help with repairs on their days off in exchange for future considerations at the livery. Thompson from the Mercantile extended additional credit for building supplies, and even Dr. Fletcher offered to contribute used furniture from his late mother's house that he'd been storing. Jenkins completed the sale with remarkable efficiency, and by mid-May, Ryder and Jessie were dividing their time between town and the ranch. They established a workable schedule: 3 days at the ranch focusing on repairs and improvements, then 4 days in town managing the boarding house and livery operations. Tom proved capable of handling the livery with minimal supervision, while Rosa took on additional responsibilities at the boarding house, proud of the trust Jessie placed in her. The arrangement was demanding but satisfying, with each passing week bringing visible improvements to the ranch property. Ryder repaired the barn roof and corrals while Jessie tackled the house, scrubbing years of dust and neglect from the rooms and gradually furnishing them with a combination of purchases and donations from town residents clearing out storage spaces. By early June, the house was habitable enough for them to stay overnight when working at the ranch, eliminating the need to ride back and forth daily. A young ranch hand named Billy was hired to assist with the heavier work and remain on the property when they were in town, ensuring continuity of care for the small herd of horses. Ryder had begun to assemble brood mares purchased from ranchers in neighboring valleys, a magnificent stallion acquired from a breeder in Denver, and several promising young colts with good bloodlines. On a warm evening in late June, Ryder and Jessie sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the surrounding mountains in shades of gold and purple. Scout lay at their feet, content after a day spent helping Billy move the horses to fresh pasture. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the bustling activity of the boarding house, offering a welcome respite from the constant demands of their town business. "I forgot how quiet it can be away from town," Jessie remarked, her hand resting comfortably in Ryder's. "No boarders requiring attention, no wagons rattling past at all hours." "Do you miss it?" Ryder asked, curious about her adaptation to this aspect of ranch life. The boarding house had been her domain for years, its rhythms and requirements familiar territory. The ranch, with its different demands and isolation, represented a significant change. Jessie considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I miss the conversations, the sense of being at the center of town activities. But then I look around at what we're building here and it feels right. As if this is where we were meant to be all along, we just took a circuitous route to find it." Ryder squeezed her hand gently, understanding exactly what she meant. His own journey from loss to renewal had been equally roundabout, yet had led to this moment of contentment he could never have anticipated when he rode into Anima's Forks that stormy night. "I have something to tell you," Jessie said after a moment, her voice holding a note of suppressed excitement. "I wanted to be certain before I said anything, but I visited Dr. Fletcher yesterday while you were meeting with the blacksmith." Ryder turned to her, suddenly alert to the significance in her tone. "Are you unwell?" "Quite the opposite," Jessie replied, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "I'm with child, Ryder. Due around Christmas, according to the doctor." For a moment, Ryder couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the news and its implications. Then, with a joy he hadn't felt since Scout's unexpected return, he gathered Jessie into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, which to him she was. "A child," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Our child." Jessie nodded against his shoulder, her own eyes bright with happy tears. "Dr. Fletcher says everything appears normal. I'm a bit older than most first-time mothers, but he sees no reason for concern." "You'll have the best of care," Ryder promised, already mentally cataloging the preparations needed. "We'll make sure the house is properly winterized before the cold sets in, and perhaps we should consider staying here rather than at the boarding house as your time approaches. It would be quieter, less demanding." Jessie laughed softly at his immediate shift to practical planning. "There's plenty of time to decide all that. For now, I just wanted to share the news with you, to acknowledge that our family is growing." Family. The word resonated deeply for Ryder, who had once believed that particular dream lost forever. Now, impossibly, he found himself not only married to a woman he adored but anticipating the birth of their child. The realization was both humbling and exhilarating. "Thank you," he said simply, unable to fully express the depth of his gratitude for the life they were building together. Jessie seemed to understand without further explanation. "We've both been given a second chance, Ryder. All we can do is make the most of it for ourselves, and for this little one." As if in agreement, Scout raised his head and placed it on Jessie's lap, his soulful eyes moving between his humans as if sensing the importance of the moment. Jessie stroked his ears affectionately, including him in the family circle. "Scout approves," she said with a smile. "He's probably already planning how to herd this child once it's mobile." "God help any coyote that comes within a mile of the baby," Ryder agreed, imagining the border collie's protective instincts extending to the newest member of his pack. As darkness fell and stars appeared in the vast mountain sky, they remained on the porch, talking of the future plans for the ranch, for the business in town, for their expanding family. The conversation was practical in many ways, addressing logistics and timing, but underlying the details was a current of deep joy and wonder at the life they'd found together. The months that followed brought both challenges and rewards. As summer turned to autumn, Ryder and Jessie established a more settled routine, with Jessie gradually reducing her time in town as her pregnancy progressed. Rosa proved increasingly capable of managing the boarding house daily operations, consulting with Jessie on major decisions, but handling routine matters with confidence. Tom similarly took on more responsibility at the livery, freeing Ryder to focus on developing the horse breeding operation at the ranch. Word of the quality stock being raised at the renamed Westbrook Ranch spread throughout the region, bringing buyers from as far away as Durango and Montrose. Ryder's expertise in selecting and training horses, combined with Jessie's shrewd business sense, quickly established their reputation for fair dealing and superior animals. By November, The ranch house had been fully renovated to Jessie's satisfaction, warm, comfortable, and prepared for the arrival of its newest resident. A nursery was established in the small room adjacent to their bedroom, furnished with a cradle crafted by the town carpenter, and a rocking chair that had belonged to Jessie's mother, shipped all the way from Boston at considerable expense. As winter descended on the mountains and Jessie's time drew near, they decided to remain primarily at the ranch, making only occasional trips to town to oversee the businesses. Dr. Fletcher agreed to stay at the boarding house during the final week of Jessie's confinement, ensuring medical assistance would be available when needed. On a clear, cold morning 3 days before Christmas, Jessie went into labor. Ryder sent Billy galloping to town to fetch the doctor while he remained at Jessie's side, alternating between encouragement and barely concealed anxiety. Scout stationed himself outside the bedroom door, refusing to move even when coaxed, his eyes fixed on the door as if maintaining a protective vigil. Dr. Fletcher arrived with remarkable speed, his medical bag in hand and a reassuring confidence in his manner. He shooed Ryder from the room with instructions to boil water and prepare clean linens, traditional tasks that gave nervous husbands something useful to do during the waiting period. The labor progressed normally, but slowly, extending through the day and into the evening. Ryder paced the downstairs rooms, periodically checking on the livestock to distract himself, while Scout maintained his position outside the bedroom door, occasionally whining when Jessie's muffled groans became audible. Finally, as midnight approached and a light snow began to fall outside, a new sound broke the tense silence of the house, the lusty cry of a newborn taking its first breath. Ryder froze in the act of adding wood to the stove, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and anticipation. Dr. Fletcher appeared at the top of the stairs, his face tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Westbrook. You have a daughter. Mother and child are both doing well. A daughter." The words seemed to echo in the room, filling spaces Ryder hadn't known were empty. With legs that suddenly felt unsteady, he climbed the stairs and entered the bedroom where Jessie reclined against pillows, her face exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly, her voice hoarse from the exertion of labor but filled with wonder. Ryder approached the bed cautiously, overwhelmed by the moment and the tiny life it had produced. As he gazed down at the infant, red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair plastered to her head, he felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching a finger to his daughter's impossibly small hand. To his amazement, the tiny fingers closed around his in a grip that seemed to connect directly to his heart. "What shall we call her?" Jessie asked, watching the interaction with tired contentment. Ryder considered for a moment, then suggested, "Martha Elizabeth." "To honor both our pasts while celebrating our future." Tears glistened in Jessie's eyes as she nodded. "Martha Elizabeth Westbrook. It's perfect." She shifted slightly, making room beside her on the bed. "Sit with us for a while." As Ryder settled carefully beside his wife and newborn daughter, Scout finally abandoned his post at the door, entering the room with uncharacteristic caution. He approached the bed, nose twitching as he investigated the new scent, then sat beside them, his expression as close to a smile as a dog could manage. "The guardian has approved," Dr. Fletcher observed with amusement as he packed his instruments. "I've never seen such a determined chaperone. He wouldn't let anyone near the door without inspection. He's appointed himself protector of the family," Ryder explained, reaching down to ruffle the dog's ears gratefully. "Has been since he found his way back to me." As the doctor departed with promises to return the following day, Ryder remained beside Jessie and Martha, reluctant to break the spell of these first precious hours. Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping the ranch in a blanket of white that muffled all sound except the occasional crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of his sleeping daughter. "I never thought I'd have this again," he admitted quietly, his arm around Jessie's shoulders. "A home, a family, a purpose. When I rode into Anima's Forks that night, I'd lost everything I valued. And now," Jessie prompted, her head resting against his shoulder. "Now I have more than I ever dreamed possible," Ryder replied, the truth of it settling deep in his bones. "A wife I adore, a daughter to cherish, work that matters, a community that values us." Even Scout returned against all odds. "From loss to renewal," Jessie murmured, her eyes drifting closed as exhaustion overcame her. "That's our story, isn't it?" "It is," Ryder agreed, carefully adjusting the blanket around her and the baby. "Rest now. I'll watch over you both." As Jessie slept and Martha dozed contentedly in her arms, Ryder maintained his vigil, Scout at his feet, both guardians of the precious life they'd been given. Outside the window, the snow transformed the landscape into a clean slate of possibility, much as circumstances had transformed his life from despair to joy. He remembered with perfect clarity the words Jessie had spoken on that first night, when he was broken by grief, and she was a stranger offering kindness. "Then let me be all three for you." What had begun as simple comfort had become profound truth. In Jessie, he had found not just a wife but a home for his heart. In their shared enterprises, he had found purpose and community. And in Martha Elizabeth, they had created a future bright with promise. The cowboy who had lost everything had found something even more valuable, not a replacement for what was gone, but a new life built on the foundation of the old, honoring the past while embracing the future. As the first light of dawn touched the eastern sky, Ryder Westbrook held his family close and gave silent thanks for second chances, for healing, and for the unexpected journey that had brought him home.